Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Post-Production Theatre. This morning we're going to discuss getting closer to the camera, how post-expertise have been brought to the forefront of the production process. My name's Tristan Hey. Although it does say I work for Technicolor, I only started there on Monday. I've been at another company called 4K London for the past 2 years. And there I developed with the team there to support the digital imaging technicians for on-set work, supporting feature films, and also supporting commercials. So I'm going to introduce you to our panel. This is Jules. Would you like to introduce yourself, Jules?
Good morning, everybody. My name's Jules Quantrill. I work for a company called Archer's Mark. We are a fully self-service film production company. I head up the post-production side of the company. I've sort of been working in post-production for about 6 years, and we do a whole host of things from music videos to high-end online brand content to feature films, documentaries, and we shoot a lot of stuff on Red cameras, Canons, and so I'm sort of involved in the workflow of all of that, and we're sort of fully tapeless due to all of that, and yeah, so that's kind of me.
Thank you, Jules. And this is Alex.
Morning all. I work for Post Blue. We're a post-production company in North London, and day to day I find myself editing and colour correcting, and quite often on set as well, sort of usually on Epic cameras and F65 and things like that.
Cool. Thank you very much. And at the end is Chris.
How's it? I'm Chris. I'm the workflow consultant at Evolutions Post. We mainly do large rig shows and entertainment TV. I'm also a director. I've done advertising and films mainly.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, guys. So the first question I've got for you is, how has the introduction of file-based cameras changed the post workflow? Chris?
Well, I think it's really brought to the forefront how organization is important, which has changed. Whereas I think beforehand we had a kind of situation where production could be less concerned with post, with tapes and stuff, because a digibeta is a digibeta. With the introduction of file-based media, you kind of have to be a lot stricter with your workflows. On top of that, you had the introduction of codecs, and various codecs affect your production pipeline, your post-production pipeline, and can affect your budget. So it kind of changed, and then there was all the question of offline, online, where is it we can cut online, you know, we can save money on budgets that way. So the question of which route your post took suddenly forked, basically, I think. And when that happened, I think there wasn't a knowledge transfer passed down, and I think a lot of people kind of assumed that they could just follow previous practices and things would continue the way that they're going.
Alex, would you tend to agree with what Chris is saying?
Yeah, I do. I mean, to some extent, when we talk about post changing, in some ways it's actually now reverting back to what was happening when people shot everything on film. Because we now, when we shoot with these higher-end digital cameras, we have this very set-in-stone kind of offline and then an online process, which is what you would do with film and to some extent tape. It is the organisational side, like Chris says. That's what's really critical in all of this, whether you work online right from the very beginning or not.
I think when I first started seeing it, it was kind of like, obviously the initial mistake was the folder structures.
Yeah.
We started getting a lot of footage where folder structures were damaged, right? So in other words, people kind of could see the video file and they could see the little QuickTime icon, and it's like, well, that must be my video file. So they go in and they grab that and rip it out. By doing that, it kind of damaged the file's ability to load, as you guys know, to load in various non-linear editing platforms. So it was that kind of discipline, exactly like you say, that kind of was in the film industry that had to then come into TV. Now, at Evolutions, we do a lot of documentary stuff. Now, obviously, documentary, it's very hard to control the environment that you're in when you're shooting. Whereas, obviously, more drama-based film, you have a studio, you have a set, you have usually a lot of crew, you can control that, so the discipline can be there. And I think that discipline was lost, and that it actually costs quite a lot of money, you know. And then, on top of that, you obviously had the deletion of cards, you know. I never kind of quite fully understood it because we're so careful with film. You know, when we shoot in film, there's somebody is completely dedicated, and it's a very precise thing to change the mags and to get the film stock in. Whereas that was just kind of lost. It was like, we shoot the stuff, there's a card. Usually it went to a junior or somebody like that, like, oh, okay, we'll put it into a computer. You know, so I think that discipline, it's slowly starting to come back, and I feel that a lot of people have kind of got the idea that, you know, the folder structures are very important in these files. The actual management, once it comes out of the camera, is very important.
Are you seeing that from your end, Jules?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's sort of there's so many cameras out there now as well, and they're so accessible for everybody, and everybody sort of, you're getting younger people, sort of students as well, getting these sort of Canons, and you just plugging these cards in and using them, and there's so many different sort of flash cards out there as well, and like I say, yeah, like we were saying, there's no sort of consistency with how these are sort of managed afterwards. A lot of people just sort of plug them in, drop them onto hard drives, and expect them to do what we all, want them to do. But yeah, you have to be a bit sort of strict with like when you're sort of offlining onlining and all that sort of thing with them, you know.
So are there any sort of cost implications that you guys have seen through receiving a load
definitely
of random material?
I mean, I think you've obviously got the organization side, which is important. Now, obviously, the cost in that is staff on the other end to repair any damage that's been done, you know, and your ability to trade XMLs, EDLs, etc., becomes a lot harder if file names changed, information is dropped. The other implication, of course, is the codec issue, right? So when you've got various different codecs, it's no longer like you're shooting just one rate, right? There's actually a decision you can make with recorders and things like that. Now, an example, we've got production we're doing at the moment where they had a recorder and they were shooting 140 megabits per second, right? Because they just thought that was a nice codec, sounds good. But they had 3 cameras recording 8 hours a day. So suddenly their storage went whoop, and when they saw that on their quote, they went, "Oh my God, what, you know, what's going on here?" And it's exactly the same codec, just a different rate. You know, so something as small as that can suddenly inflate your post budget just on the storage side and the copying side, and you know, actually the ability to move this media around.
I think people don't. That's another thing that people are underestimating their storage capabilities. They sort of, if you set up your post side to deal with tapeless tape workflows, and then you start getting in like a red camera or something like that, it's you're going to fill up really quickly. Like if you've got sort of a smaller, like I don't know, 10 terabytes or something RAID, or 20 or something like that, and you start shooting 9 hours of red 5K, you know, in a day on a shoot, like we do sometimes, and you come back to the office and you start putting it on the thing, and it just starts filling out. Your RAID is just full by the end, and then you're like, well, oh, I need to transcode as well. What do I do? So I think that, you know, people need to realise also that it's across everything. You need to sort of set up your workflows with storage in mind, as well as, you know, everything else.
Yeah.
You know.
The issue there as well is, unlike tape, where you can put a digibeta or an HD cam tape in and spool through it and pick the bits out that you want, with raw file formats, you've got to copy the whole thing across before you can go through that selective process. And okay, you can transcode only the bits that you think you're going to use for your offline edit, but you've still got to store all of that raw material somewhere. And that's an issue that I think gets kind of lost, or can be lost, in certain productions. especially multi-camera productions as well.
And why do you
definitely.
think that is? Is that because you've got an asset, or because people think storage is cheap? What's your...
I think it's, in my experience, it's been that people simply don't even consider it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Storage is quite cheap, and that's a good thing now. If it wasn't, then we wouldn't be able to shoot on these high-end formats. But yeah, people. That's why we're having this discussion, is because people now are aware that there are these issues that we have to be aware of. And
well, I think that's two elements that we've already highlighted there. There's obviously the issue with your file management. There's then the issue of being aware of your storage. I think there's also a third issue that affects your story. Now, as you mentioned, when you shot tape, you could ingest it as one long piece. So the people making notes on set doing their log notes could write time codes which would pertain to a particular thing. So sunset is at this time to that time. So the editor, it was relatively easy for him to find it because he'd have a long chunk. So he'd go in, input the time code, bang, there's his clip. Tapeless clips obviously shoot individual clips. So therefore, there's a lot of production people that will kind of like log it as if it's a tape. And then when it comes to actually sitting in the edit, especially like you say, multicam edits or anything that has a large amount, the editor's kind of like, well, I can't just input a time code because I don't have a continuous take here. I need to know exactly what the clip name is for me to go and find that in my bin to speed this up. So, like I say, there's a kind of edit producer side of it as well. But I think all three of those points highlight the need for post-production to be more involved in the production stage.
So from an on-set perspective, is that what you're sort of edging towards? Do you think that on-set needs to be directly involved with post?
As we know, there's the on-set role of a DIT, which is an important role now. And there's a definition of a DIT. You know, how do we define it? There's DITs that really, you know, go the whole hog. They do color management on set, and they do more than just backing up files. And then there's a data wrangler role, which is equally as important, and perhaps all you need on certain shoots as well. The key is that there's someone managing the process of getting from shoot to post, and ideally you want kind of everyone on the camera department and the post department to be aware of the issues from both ends.
I think you need that link now. It's vitally important. Another example that I know of, there was a studio production that was shooting drama-based in a studio, and it was a small studio, and they're obviously using the studio power supply. Now, they had a system set up where they were shooting on Alexas. It was going straight to the recorder. The recorder was then going straight to an LTO system and then drives. Now, the person they hired to manage this was a junior, okay, young guy just out of university. And essentially, he daisy-chained all the drives to the main power source. They had a power surge, and everything blew, right? They lost an hour's worth of footage. Ooh. When they approached the insurance company wouldn't pay the cost of that lost time because the person they'd hired to manage it was a junior. And I think that's the important point. This person at one stage on set is controlling your media. And that has to be important because that's essentially why you're up a mountain, why you're in a
and also
studio.
that link between the on-set person and the post world as well, so you receive your files in the correct format.
Yeah.
And also with the correct metadata and report sheets and everything that goes along with that.
Well, I mean, I think we highlighted with the previous points, I mean, you've got those three things. If there's somebody on set and they see somebody doing something that could essentially save the production time and money on the other end, it's a quick, like, oh, no, I wouldn't do that because it's going to cause a ripple effect and do this. It's like, yeah, okay, fine. That's the problem solved almost instantaneously. But if that person's not present, or even if there's no communication with the post house, it's just so easy to make the mistake.
Yeah, I mean, from a post-production point of view, we find, I think you guys find the same as me, money is saved the earlier post-production is involved, you know, because problems don't arise with things like file names and folder structures and has everything been backed up. And you know, it's important to have someone who's clued up as to how to get from A to B, from camera to post.
Yeah. And I think that's why it's important. I mean, you've got your data wrangler, and your data wrangler essentially needs to have the ability to understand a bit of IT, how to format drives, what's the safest way to move the media around, also understand the timings of this media. So in other words, understand that if I've got X amount of terabytes, it's going to take me X amount of time to actually get it off a system and put it onto this system, which is going to affect any post schedule. And I think that's important. And, you know, a data wrangler can be fairly junior as long as they have those skills. Whereas I feel a DIT is a much more skilled role, because a DIT is essentially somebody there that is there not just to manage the safety of this, but to manage the entire workflow through the pipeline and make it smooth. And I'm sure Tristan knows quite a lot about that. You know.
Yeah, I think any material that is delivered across to a post facility, it needs to be in a sort of structured sense. Metadata needs to be correct. Obviously, the most important things are like the raw material is checksummed, so the material that is delivered to wherever, there is a guarantee that what has been offloaded from that material on set and then wiped on set is also stored on those drives. That is then passed across to the post facility, hopefully with some camera report sheets of some kind, something similar to a neg report sheet. So you guys know what you're getting, and there's a paper trail to ensure that what you receive is what's on those drives. Basic information such as the codec that you're shooting in, so you know how to process that material, the color space if it's available on the camera, what kind of color space, what kind of LUT transfer needs to be applied to that material to guarantee that, you know, if you're say you're delivering in a Rec 709, you want to receive your material as flat as possible if you're going on for grading. I know you guys have got experience with grading, so there's a whole mass amount of information. It's a knowledge base as well, of learning about what the camera can do, so from a technical background, and also what you guys need in order to process it correctly and essentially save time and money.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, I think, you know, a DIT has to kind of sit somewhere between a camera department and post-production. You know, he needs to understand cameras, like you say, what they can do, how they work best, and also understand IT and, you know, data management. Color management is really important. You know, with all of these kind of flat LUT workflows that we have now, if you don't have a DIT that's skilled enough to calibrate your monitor, you don't know what you're looking at.
Yep. Okay, so let's just. Where do you think that's going to come then? Where do you think that's going to come from? Is it a skill set that you're going to pass through the post, or is it from the camera department, or is it a separate role?
I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be more and more of a separate role. I mean, if you look at companies like Euro 14K London, that was your speciality, wasn't it? I mean, that's what you guys did, and that's going to be that. I think that's it. You're going to get more and more companies like 4K,
and that's going to save you time.
Yeah, but because it's vital, like we've been saying. It's just otherwise you may as well not bother. You know, you may as well just go back to tape. I think, you know, there's no point shooting on these great cameras and, you know, hiring these great cameras just to, you know, sort of mess it up at the end of it. You know, you need this thing in the middle, this guy in the middle that knows how to do it, and yeah, I think it's going to get more and more important. I think it's to get the
best out of it, because I mean, look, let's not kid ourselves. The cameras that we have available to us now are incredible. The things that we can do now, you know, even 10 years ago, you know. I mean, like, for instance, I listen to a lot of punk rock music, and I've known bands from like 20 years ago that used to have to shoot their videos because they were low budget on like VHSs and stuff, and the quality looks terrible now. But the modern bands that are the same as them, that have the same budget, are shooting on like 5Ds and like, you know, stuff that looks filmic and looks fantastic. So what these cameras can do is incredible as far as creativity, but they come with a set of rules, and we all need to work together, I think, to start really using the potential of these cameras.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I think we're coming to a close. So thank you very much, Chris, Alex, and Jules. Does anyone have any questions at all? The gentleman in the red. Do we have a microphone? No?
Do you think first question is, how does anyone assess whether somebody is this new super DIT or whatever the new name for it is? Because technician maybe isn't the right term for workflow supervisor. In other words, the person who's saying, I am responsible for the workflow and always will be. I'm going to come up with it, and the insurance company is better going to assess me, and I'm going to be the person. And essentially the post house and the camera department and everybody else and the editor and the producer is essentially has to look to them as a professional. How do we get to that level of a kind of accreditation or trust in terms of delivery? So, and also, you don't really need a post house if you have a good enough one of these guys, because essentially if you go from set and the person's there, then the editing department could be anywhere. Doesn't actually need a post house, because all, so maybe post houses may go away a little bit once these people get good enough. So
Possibly.
Yeah, I think, that's interesting. I think post is going through a bit of a time, not a strange time, but a particular time where I think it's going to be more about the specialities in post houses. Like, there's a lot of post houses that have closed down in the past sort of 5 to 10 years, and I think it's going to be more about people doing color correction and all that sort of thing. And perhaps that might be an issue in that sense. But I think there's always going to be that link. You can't just say that there's going to be one guy that deals with it and then sort of moves on.
Well, I'm not necessarily saying that the DIT will do everything, but they may be the person who is supervising what the post house is doing, and there may be 2 or 3 people at various different desks nearby, if you see what I mean.
I would tend to agree with that. I mean, I think your first point about how do we standardize this and give names, I think that has to come from an industry body, really, because we can all go around independently calling people whatever we like to call them, but I think the broadcasters, the studios, the production teams, and the post have to get together and agree on what this role actually is and how it's going to develop. As far as post houses, I mean, I think the argument here is always hardware and expertise, right? Now, essentially, if you've got a MacBook Pro and a Thunderbolt, you can cut stuff online. Like, I onlined a TV advert recently on my laptop, which was partly because I've had the experience, so I know what I'm doing, and secondly, because I've got the speed and the hardware. But obviously, as the footage gets bigger, the hardware's going to need to get bigger. So it's always like a race, if you see what I mean. And obviously, the more that you shoot, the storage becomes bigger, and that's where you're going to need a post house. I mean, I personally believe within the next 5 years, your standard machine room isn't going to look like it does now. It's going to essentially look like a server room.
Cool. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else for any more questions?
No?
Thank you. Oh, there's a gentleman at the back. Just there. Thank you.
Actually, just a straightforward question. How can you get work as a data wrangler or a DIT?
Good question.
That's a very
Maybe
good
one for you,
question. How do you get to work as a data wrangler DIT? It's I don't know. You can approach my previous company. How do you get to work? You put me on the spot here. I don't really know.
We have at Archer's Mark. We always have a DIT with us, and usually they are they're starting to be more edit assistants are going for these jobs now. So guys that are like with SO editors and all those sort of agencies are putting these edit assistants forward for those sort of types of jobs because it's all like we've been saying, it's all becoming part of that. So that's how we sort of get our DITs onto our shoots.
There is the other option if you, just thinking back, the previous company I worked at, the DITs tend to come from a camera background, so they would start off in the camera department, and they would work up to the level of a focus puller, and then they would enter into that market. That's more sort of the DIT. So the way I like to think of it is there's a split between sort of a DIT and a data wrangler. The data wrangler is somebody who goes onto set, does your checksums, make sure your media's okay, fills out a report sheet, and then delivers the production 2 copies of the material or however many copies they require. The DIT, it's a new role, it's an emerging role. They're involved more with the support of the DOP. So they're setting up the camera, playing with the look of the outputted look of the material with 3D LUTs, color management systems, doing more complex external recorders, the codecs on board, for example, setting up all those kind of things. So it's more of it's a developing role. So there isn't necessarily one option in to become a DIT. You can pass from both ends, so from a post background or from an on-set background. So
I would say there's 2 main ways that you can approach it. You can either, like Tristan says, come from a camera side, so you start off on that side of it, either in a rentals house or actually being on set as a third assistant or something like that. Or you come from it from a post side, in which case, you know, like at Evolutions, we obviously have a lot of runners that we hire up. So you start at a runner, and I mean, I always look if there's anyone that has that kind of interest, so they're interested in computers, they understand, they quickly pick up how to format drives, etc., all of that, then I put that as an option to them if they're interested in doing it. So I think those are the 2 routes that you could take.
I think it's very important to have knowledge from both ends, though. So you obviously understand what the cameras can do, you understand the equipment, the politics of how a camera department works, and then also you understand the files that you're delivering at the end. So you've got an understanding of the post chain, the metadata, what needs to be delivered to make your guys' jobs a lot easier.
Yeah. I think we might see the way into this role changing a little bit over time as well, because like everyone said, there's 2 ways. It's from post or from on-set, camera department. I think at the moment, I kind of think that the DITs who go from the camera department and also have the knowledge of post are the better ones, rather than the ones that come from post and kind of learn a bit about cameras. But I think we'll probably see DIT, kind of junior DIT roles emerge through companies like Tristan's old one, who kind of learn the ropes in that way, rather than coming from a kind of a side angle. They'll come directly, knowing from the very start that they want to be a DIT and they're going to work their way up.
Yeah, and I think that essentially is what we're discussing here. You know, whether, I mean, I feel that it's a need for this role to be clearly marked out, so people do know how to get into it correctly, and it's not at the moment. It's a bit floaty.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
I just wanted to find out about the conversation between cinematographer and the sort of the post afterwards. Now that we've got like flat image and you can do all sorts of stuff in post.
Sorry, I can't hear your question. Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry. Just wondering about the conversation between the cinematographer and the post house. Now that everything's sort of like a flat image, and you can do so much more in post. Sort of your experience on like the cinematographer just saying, oh, we can sort that out in post and we can pull that up and push that down, and you know, your sort of experience on that.
I think it comes down to how do you monitor what you're shooting on set. And like we were talking about earlier, a good DIT is going to get your monitor calibrated in the way that the DP wants to be viewing their image. You know, it's the same as shooting film. Film, when you develop it, it's a flat image, but you can essentially grade it for monitoring on set, and for going into offline editing as well. It's exactly the same with these digital cameras, and even the lower end DSLRs that now shoot these flat images. It's about the DP is monitoring on set in some variation of Rec 709 color space. And a good DOP is shooting with the knowledge that, you know, the black levels here can be lifted and still have detail, or the highlights can be brought down a little bit. You know, that's down to a good DOP and a camera department that knows the camera that they're shooting on.
I think a lot of cinematographers fall into that trap where it is exactly the same workflow as film, but obviously with film, you're dealing with a 2K image, so you have that space. Whereas all of these cameras that will offer this type of shooting, some of them vary in the codecs that they shoot. Now that is going to affect your highs and lows. So there's a lot of DOPs that kind of go, oh, it'll be all right, I can pull that up in post, without realizing that they're actually shooting to a rather compressed codec. So when they actually do get to post, they try and pull it up and it starts to blow in step and there's not as much detail as they thought there was. And I think that is where the DIT role sits in. You know, a good DIT will sit with the DOP and they'll do tests and they'll actually have a discussion. Because remember, a lot of the best DOPs working at the moment all come from film. So they need someone who understands digital so they can say, look, I want this to look like Fujifilm stock X. Can we do that? And the guy's like, yeah, we can do that, and this is how you would do that. And that, I think, is important. And I think a lot of DOPs, in my experience, some of them have come to use this flat shooting as a bit of a blanket. It's like, I don't really have to light my shot properly because I can, you know, it can be fixed in post. And then they get a horrible shock when it's not, because they may be shooting to a compressed codec. I mean, don't get me wrong, if you're shooting to RAW, then you can do a hell of a lot. But if you're shooting to, like, I believe the new GoPro does a flat style. Now that is very compressed and it's 8-bit. So, you know, you can't kind of shoot a log image on a GoPro and then expect to grade any which way that you want to go, you know. So, yeah, in my experience, I've found that it has tripped up a couple of people.
And that comes back again to the role of a good DIT. You know, a good DIT will advise the camera department that actually this might not be the best route to go with this camera, or shooting flat with this camera. You know, there are many reasons to not shoot flat if you're shooting to a very compressed codec. You know, as long as you're shooting near enough to how you eventually want to grade the image to be.
It's good as well. Like a lot of these new cameras, like the Red, for example, like you can do a lot of this on set, like with the DIT. You know, you can go back and forth to the camera. So like you can have some guy sitting. It's what you should do. You should sit with the DOP and start playing with the colors, like with the raw stuff from the Epic, for example. You know, you just take it out of the camera, you bring it into your system, and you just play with the colors and what you can do with it in Red Cine X, and then take that back to the camera, and that's your sort of look for the rest of the shoot. And it's like there's no excuse really. Like you can just you shouldn't say oh I didn't have time or blah blah. You should make time and get it right. You know, the first time around, because you can now with these cameras. You know,
I mean, that's the thing. Like when you used to shoot high-speed film, you don't actually get to see an image on set. You know, you're just sitting there and you've got a big red button and the thing starts going, and you're just like, well, I hope it's good.
Yeah, I mean, it's not dailies anymore. It's sort of immediate leads, really, isn't it? It's like that it's there, and you can just, you know, the monitor's there, and you can play it back, and
yeah. So we shouldn't get badly shot stuff, really.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we're complaining about cameramen, you know.
Excellent. Thank you. Anybody? The lady at the front.
Hi. We've talked a little bit about the standardizing the DIT role. And I wondered, from where you're sitting, in an ideal world, what does the DIT skill set look like, and where do you see that developing over the next 5 years? The DIT role seems to be an amalgamation of needs that we've needed in the bridge between production and post. Are we going to see some fall to the sides as post houses develop and become more accustomed to dealing with workflows? Or are we going to see that other things that we haven't thought of yet maybe become more important?
Well, I think the role of the DIT is definitely going to go towards more sort of on-set colour management. So involved with, as we just discussed, taking that log image from a live feed from the camera and grading it to the liking of the DOP in a completely non-destructive fashion, and then passing that information on and having that communication with the guys that process that material, and making sure that when the dailies are made, that colour is burnt into it. But then when it goes to the grading process, you can go back to the raw and then start again. So that's my sort of personal opinion of how I think the DIT role is going to sort of evolve, but you guys might be...
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with Tristan there, is that I think it's going to come more on-set colour management, so there's going to be a DIT right there. I mean, there's going to be even points where you're going to have the colorist sitting there on set, and everybody's going to be having this conversation. As far as skills, I mean, I think, I think the camera skills, and for a really good DIT is someone that has very good camera skills, understands all of the different cameras on the markets, what they can do, what they can't do, plus has a very strong understanding of codecs XMLs, EDLs, and ideally in the future programming. Because the more programming they understand, the more that, devices that they can actually program and create themselves, bespoke, to make the workflows even smoother.
Yeah, anything
good points.
you'd like to add on that?
Yeah, I think one thing, I mean, as we sort of progress in the future with these cameras, and I think also edit software now is getting sort of better and better with the sort of 6-bit non-linear systems, and native editing is getting sort of really interesting now, and I think that's something to look forward in the future. So, you know, possibly the codec thing and transcoding in general might disappear, and then that's potentially a part of the DIT's job that won't exist anymore as well. So that's something to look out for. So maybe it shifts to more sort of data knowledge and more the IT sort of side, and getting it. You know, I think workflows are going to get smoother and smoother as we go on. So that's something DIT is sort of going to have to be involved in, and that pipeline is going to get straighter rather than a bit jagged.
Yeah, I think the thing that isn't going to change is that the DIT must have knowledge of the camera side of things.
Yeah.
The post side will change. It is always changing. It's changing now. And people just learn to deal with that. Post houses learn to deal with it, and DITs follow along as well. The camera side of it is key. And will always be the same. You know, that can't change.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One kind of more wacky possibility for the future is that obviously people reframe in post because of shooting 3K for 2, etc., etc. People recolor in post. Do you think with things like the Lightro cameras, people will actually choose depth of field in post in future as well, and the DIT will be responsible for choosing the depth of field because that's what the cameras will be recording, all depth of field?
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. It is possible. I mean, with a lot of compositing work, you can change your depth of field now. But yeah, no, I think it. I mean, obviously, like I say, it's always a race because the camera companies are trying to shoot higher K, make bigger cameras, do more, do this, and the hardware companies are chasing them, and we obviously have to adapt around it. So, yeah, I think it's possible.
But on the other hand, I do hope we don't lose that sort of the creativity of the camera, of the DOP. You know, he's the guy that sets up these beautiful frames. You know, and we don't want to fall into that sort of area where we're just like, oh, just press record and just point at the thing, and we'll deal with it later.
It's kind of like the idea of shooting a flat image and thinking, well, it'll be fine, we'll grade it.
Yeah.
You just point a camera and don't bother about focusing and think it'll be fine. We can focus it in post.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of these tools were designed for use in the worst case scenario, not become your standard. I mean, I think that's the other important point. With cameras, a lot of it's about the glass that you put on the front. The better your lens, the better your image is, and that isn't going to change. It hasn't changed.
You just change the back every 3 months as opposed to every 15 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
How are we doing for time?
Any more questions?
Is that it? One more question. One more question.
Wait, we've got time for one more question. If anybody, the gentleman on the left.
Just a quick question. Where do you think the standardization of all these skills are going to come from? Which professional body?
UK Screen are working a lot. They've started a digital partnership initiative where they've got all of the big broadcaster houses together to actually produce a manual that kind of standardizes tapeless workflows. I've been involved in that, and a lot of that is actually describing exactly what a DIT does and what a data wrangler does. So I think more of that it needs to happen from, I would say, government bodies and the broadcasters themselves. You know, so I mean, for this one, for instance, the BBC, ITV, and Channel 4, I believe.
Cool. Thank you. Well, thank you everybody for attending. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Tristan.
Alex, and thank you, Jules.
Thank you.
Thank you.